Welcome to The Debate.
It is Monday, February 2nd, 2026.
And the cinematic landscape has definitely shifted beneath our feet. We are not just talking about a movie today. We're talking about a seismic event. As of this morning, the Academy Awards nominations are out. And we are looking at a film that has defied, well, every expectation, every box office model, and frankly, every genre convention we thought we knew. I'm talking, of course, about Ryan Coogler's Sinners.
Oh, it certainly has. Shattered records. Leading the pack with 16 Academy Award nominations. That surpasses All About Eve, Titanic, and La La Land. It's a commercial juggernaut pulling in, $368 million globally already? It's being hailed as the savior of the studio system, a miracle resurrection for original filmmaking. And I will admit, seeing an original R-rated film put up those numbers, it does warm my heart.
And rightfully so. This is a film that demands we grapple with it. It is a genre-defying masterpiece of cultural commentary, a perfect, if volatile, fusion of historical weight and supernatural horror. It celebrates the blues, the Mississippi Delta. It is big, loud, and profoundly important.
Oris, if I may offer the alternative view we're here to discuss, it is a tonal mass that collapses under the weight of its own ambition. I see the accolades, and I respect the craft, believe me I do, but I'd argue that Sinners is messy, disordered, and ultimately, it alienates the audience because of its frantic genre switching and some questionable technical choices.
Well, I represent the position that this is the most culturally important film of the last year, precisely because of that volatility.
And I'm here to argue that while it is a massive swing, it is a swing that, for me, just misses the ball in terms of narrative cohesion.
All right, let's get into it. Sinner is, frankly, a miracle. We are talking about a period piece set in the Jim Crow South of 1930s Mississippi. It's centered on the Great Migration, labor rights, the blues, and it's packaged as a vampire blockbuster. That audacity alone is worth celebrating. Ryan Coogler has taken what you might call the kitchen sink approach, and I argue this is not a flaw. It's the film's greatest feature. It's a full meal for the audience.
Kitchen sink is a polite way of putting it. I might call it a garage sale. Everything's just sort of out on the lawn.
But it's accurate, though. We follow Smoke and Stack, the twin brothers played by Michael B. Jordan, returning home with money to open a juke joint. But Coogler isn't just giving us a gangster movie. He's giving us a metaphor for extraction. The central thesis here is that vampirism isn't just a monster movie trope. It is a literal representation of cultural appropriation, of the consumption of Black labor and art. When the vampires arrive, they aren't just spooky figures in capes. They represent the plantation owners, the record executives, the forces that say, I want your stories, I want your songs. To call it messy is to miss the point that the subject matter itself, the history of the Delta, is messy and violent and layered. The, unhinged plot points, like vampires demanding songs, that's bold, rule-breaking cinema.
I see why you think that. I really do. And I admire the intellectual framework Coogler's trying to build. The metaphor is sound, on paper. However, I come at it from a structural perspective. You call it a full meal, but I would call it overstuffed. The film tries to do so much that it loses its narrative discipline. We have a story about Smoke and Stack, but then there's a story about their cousin Sammy and his musical gift, and then a story about Haley Steinfeld's character Mary, and then a story about the supernatural. The result is, narratively confused. I often found myself wondering, whose story is this exactly? Is it the twins? Is it Sammy's? And the genre switch, that hard pivot from a serious, brooding period drama in the first hour to a bloody, splatter horror film in the final act. It just feels disjointed, like watching two different movies that have been glued together. And furthermore, the ending feels less like a natural conclusion and more like box checking, We get the big action sequence for the Michael B. Jordan fans, then we get an explainer scene for Sammy's arc, and it just keeps going. It feels like the film is terrified of leaving any loose ends. And we haven't even gotten to the visuals yet, but shooting on these huge, expensive formats only to have the background constantly blurry, it just kept me at a distance.
Okay, that's a compelling argument, but let's drill down into that structure, specifically the genre shift you mentioned. You call it disjointed. I call it a necessary slow burn. The first hour establishes the community. We need to understand the highs and lows of the Black experience in 1930s Clarksdale before the horror can even begin. We need to see Bo and Grace Chow running the grocery store. We need to see the town's geography. I mean, think about the scene where Smoke is negotiating for the sawmill equipment. It takes time. It's methodical. We see the racial dynamics, the economic anxiety. It actually reminds me of From Dusk Till Dawn, but with much deeper thematic resonance. In that film, the switch is a joke, a pulp thrill. Here, if we didn't spend that time establishing the sanctity of the juke joint as a safe space, the violation of that space by the vampires wouldn't hit nearly as hard. The shift isn't an error, it's an escalation.
I'm sorry, I just don't buy that comparison. In From Dusk Till Dawn, the pacing is tight. It's a road movie that crashes headfirst into a vampire movie. Here, the pacing in the first act is sluggish. We spend a tremendous amount of time on the logistics of buying a sawmill. And while the texture is nice, I like the scene in the grocery store, it drags. It feels like a standard prestige drama that forgot it was supposed to be a thriller. And then, when the shift happens, it is jarring. We go from a thoughtful drama to, literally growling metal music and heads being chopped off. It undermines the serious character work done earlier. When you have a film that spends an hour meditating on the trauma of the Jim Crow South, and then suddenly Michael B. Jordan is dual-wielding shotguns against flying Irish vampires, the audience is left wondering, are we watching a profound drama or just a shoot-'em-up? It feels like it lacks the courage to just be one thing.
I'm not convinced by that, because the violence is the theme. You cannot separate the drama from the horror in this context. Look at the villains. The vampires/Remick, played by Jack O'Connell, they're not just monsters. They sing Irish folk songs. They're charming. They are the plantation owners and record execs I mentioned. When they say, I want your stories, I want your songs, that is a violent demand. So the explosion of violence in the third act is the only logical response. It's not a shoot 'em up for the sake of action. It's a reclamation of autonomy. That growling metal isn't a distraction. It's the sound of rage that's been suppressed for an hour finally boiling over. It's catharsis, plain and simple.
I appreciate the metaphorical weight, and Jack O'Connell is terrifyingly charismatic. I will absolutely give you that. But let's look at the execution of the human characters, specifically the much-discussed dual performance by Michael B. Jordan.
It is absolutely seamless. This is career-defining work. He plays Smoke and Stack, identical twins, and gives them completely distinct personalities. Stack is swaggering, the troublemaker. Smoke is melancholy, somber, carrying the weight of the war. And we do need to talk about the tech here, because I think people are glossing over how hard this is. They used a halo rig to film the interactions. This isn't like The Parent Trap where you just lock off the camera.
Right. Usually it's a split screen and the actor's talking to a tennis ball.
Exactly. But here, the camera is moving. The halo rig is a motion control system that lets Jordan act against the double and then do the scene again. And the camera replicates the exact same move. It allows for a physical intimacy, touching, fighting, that we've never seen in a dual performance. There's that moment where Stack grabs Smoke by the collar. That's technically impossible without this rig. The illusion never breaks.
It is technically impressive. I will grant you that. The lack of seams is remarkable. The scene where they're sharing a drink and the camera circles them is a marvel. But I have to ask, is the dual role a necessary narrative device, or is it a gimmick to secure an Oscar nomination? It just feels like a flex, a way to say, look what I can do. Did the story need them to be twins? I'd argue it could have been two brothers played by two different actors without the distraction of spot the seam. But my bigger issue with the casting is, somewhere else. We need to talk about Haley Steinfeld as Mary.
I suspect I know where you're going with this.
Casting a major pop star to play a white passing character in the Jim Crow South, it felt distracting. There were moments it felt like Among Us casting, like we're waiting for someone to point it out. It bordered on cringe for me. And while she's talented, having her speak in AAVE and navigate that specific racial complexity felt like a bridge too far. It just pulled me out of the 1930s.
That's an interesting point, though I would frame it differently. I mean, the source material credits her with capturing the sweet, aching pain of the character. Mary is a woman straddling two worlds. Steinfeld portrays that racial complexity with a lot of nuance. It's about the privilege of passing becoming her undoing. Think about the scene at the dance hall, where she's terrified of being recognized. It is supposed to be uncomfortable. That tension you feel, that is the point. It's not cringe. It's the discomfort of a racial caste system. If she disappeared seamlessly into the role, you might miss the tension of her constantly performing whiteness. The casting adds a meta layer that I think works.
Perhaps. I found it took me out, but I see the intent. Let's pivot to the way this world is presented visually, because this is where I have my strongest disagreements. We've heard so much about the historic use of Ultra Panavision 70 and IMAX cameras. First time a film has been shot this way.
And it is magnificent. The cinematography captures the heat, the sweat of the South. You can feel the humidity. It looks expensive. It looks cinematic. It justifies the theatrical experience. It treats the Mississippi Delta with the visual reverence of a David Lean epic.
Okay, but this is where I struggle with the more is better philosophy. Yes, it's shot on large format, but let's talk about what that actually does to the image. When you shoot on Ultra Panavision 70, your depth of field becomes razor thin.
You mean the background blur?
Exactly. So what that means in practice is that if Michael B. Jordan is in focus, the person standing 3 feet behind him is a complete blur. The background is often just a wash of bokeh. We're in the Mississippi Delta, one of the most visually distinct landscapes in America, and yet, for large chunks of the movie, the setting is visually lost. There's a shot where they're walking down a dirt road, and there are these sharecropper cabins in the distance. Beautiful sets. But you can't see them clearly. They're just soft shapes. Why shoot on location if the audience is held at a visual distance from the environment? It feels like the technology got in the way of the storytelling. It creates detachment.
I see that, and it is a very distinct look. It's dreamy. But let me offer a different perspective. The shallow focus is a deliberate choice to prioritize the people. The focus is on the textures of the costumes, Ruth E. Carter's incredible work, and the faces of the actors. It prioritizes humanity over scenery. It makes the film feel intimate despite its epic scale. It's not about seeing every leaf on a tree in the background. It's about seeing the sweat on Michael B. Jordan's brow. It forces the audience to look exactly where Coogler wants them to look. It says the people are more important than the landscape.
I value intimacy, but I also value context. And when the context is blurred out, I feel unmoored. But speaking of feeling unmoored, we have to discuss the soundscape.
The music. This is the film's MVP. Ludwig Göransson's score and the soundtrack are characters in themselves.
They are certainly present.
No, it's masterful. You have Sammy, whose guitar playing literally summons the past, present, and future. We are talking about Afrofuturism blended with traditional blues. The music is in background, it's an auditory haunting.
I acknowledge the music is good on its own terms. Ludwig is a genius. But does it fit the movie? We are in 1932, and suddenly we're hearing modern trap flows and growling metal breaks. It breaks the period emerging completely. It just contributes to that messiness I spoke of earlier. There's a pivotal scene where they're driving at night terrified of the Klan. The tension is high. And then suddenly the score drops into this heavily produced modern trap beat with 808 bass kicks. It took me out of the stakes entirely. It feels anachronistic in a way that just serves a cool factor. It's Baz Luhrmann syndrome style, over substance. It made the film feel like a music video.
But that anachronism is the point. The film is arguing that these struggles, extraction, racism, violence, are not stuck in 1932. They are present today. The music bridges that gap. When Sammy plays, he isn't just playing the blues, he is summoning the future of black music. It's supposed to feel timeless. If you just played generic 1930s blues, it would feel like a museum exhibit. This makes it feel urgent. The trap beats represent the continuity of that struggle. It's saying this is happening now. It's alive.
I suppose we just fundamentally disagree on whether that vitality translates to a coherent viewing experience. For me, it broke the spell. For you, it cast the spell.
It seems so. But we can agree the box office numbers suggest the general audience was ready for the ride. They didn't seem to mind the blur or the trap beats.
The numbers are undeniable, but popularity doesn't equate to perfection. So to summarize my position, Sinners is technically impressive and ambitious, but it's fundamentally flawed. It's a messy picture. It throws the kitchen sink at the genre, but lacks the narrative discipline to organize it all. It tries to satisfy every demographic, the horror fans, the drama fans, the action fans, and in doing so, it mutes its own impact.
And all maintain that the messiness is actually its vitality. Sinners is a refusal to romanticize trauma. It reclaims the horror genre. It is a full meal that reinvigorated the box office. It takes massive risks, mixing history, horror, music, and it lands them with emotional power. It's the most culturally important film of the year because it refuses to be small. It refuses to stay in its box.
Well, we can certainly agree on one thing. Ryan Coogler has cemented himself as a singular visionary.
Absolutely. He takes massive swings.
Even if we disagree on whether this specific swing connected fully, the fact that a studio gave him the resources to make a 1930s vampire epic on this scale, shot on 70mm film, that's remarkable.
It demands to be discussed, and that is what we've done today. Whether you love the execution or find it frustrating, Sinners is a film that will be studied for years to come.
Indeed, it is a film you cannot ignore.
Thank you for joining us on The Debate. We will see you next time.